For Sanguinary Heresy, a Loyalist, Emperor's Children. They're starting to become my main Space Marine army, and I've definitely painted them different ways, and I kind of recommend this because the Emperor's Children are all individualist. But for this guy, let's have our basic standard color scheme. Also, I converted him a little by giving him a Dark Angel pointy arm, a Malleus's power sword, and a Blood Angel head. We base coat his armor with Heavy Violet by Vallejo. You can also use Phoenician Purple by Citadel. Then we paint his hair and his upper torso and arms with Gray Seer. And we do this because white is a significant color with the Emperor's Children, and this guy we're painting is a sergeant. I probably do use too much white on these figures. You probably should only just use it on their helmets or their shoulder pads, but I do like the contrast of having mostly white for important characters. But I also see the Emperor's Children being very decorative and individualist with their own armors, so you can give them as much purple or white as you want. We base coat the gold areas with Flat Earth by Vallejo, and then paint his skin with Pallid Witch Flesh. You can also use Heavy Warm Gray by Vallejo. We do this because the Emperor's Children's Genefly is they're basically Valerians from Game of Thrones. They're basically albino with silver hair. We paint the gold with Old Gold by Vallejo. You can also use Polished Gold. Paint his base with Orc Blood by Army Painter. You can also use Red Violet by Vallejo. Paint areas you want to be silver and the in-between armor bits with black. Paint the silver with Shining Silver by Army Painter. You can also use Stormhost Silver. Shade the purple with Purple Tone, shade the gold with Brown Tone, as well as the skin, and then shade the white with Apothecary White Contrast Paint. Highlight the armor back up to a pure white, keeping the Gray Seer for his hair. Paint any extra details like tabards or Purity Seal Wax with Squid Pink by Vallejo. You can also use, ironically, Emperor's Children Pink. Dot the helmet's eyes with Moot Green by Citadel. Apply transfers, and after a matte varnish, here he is. How would I have Fulgrim go loyal? Well, simple. He doesn't get the Lair Blade. The Emperor's Children never participate in the cleansing of Lair, and Fulgrim becomes one of the most loyal members of the Imperium. Instead, thanks to some demon shenanigans and Erebus, Gilgamesh is brought to Lair to get the Lair Blade.
So, you've taken up Frostmourne at the expense of your comrades' lives, just as the Dark Lord said you would. You're stronger than I thought.
You waste your breath, Mal'Ganis. I heed only the voice of Frostmourne now.
You hear the voice of the Dark Lord. He whispers to you through the blade you wield. What does he say, young human? What does the Dark Lord of the Dead tell you now?
Gilgamesh returned to Macragge and actually was the first one to declare for Chaos, and he began decimation of his legion for all Loyalists, which started a massive civil war between Gilgamesh and Chaos supporters and Loyalists to the Imperium. The Loyalists, led by Remus Ventatus and Tylos Rubio, donned red armor in opposition. The Ultramar Civil War kept the Ultramarines out of the Great or Sanguinary Heresy. Despite the efforts of the Loyalists, the traitors eventually won. After a long battle of Calth, the Loyalists' capital, most of Ultramar became a warp storm almost as bad as the Eye of Terror, known as the Ultra Storm. Many of the Loyalists escaped into the warp, but most of them escaped with the surviving Tolos, and along with Sigismund they founded the Grey Knights. After the Siege of Terra, Fulgrim fully embraced the Codex Astartes, believing it as a perfect starting point for Marines. The only major difference outside of having individuality between the Marines is, instead of having chapter commanders, they're all called Lord Commanders, and the chapter master is known as the Lord High Commander. And they soon became the legion with the most amount of successor chapters. And much like the Feast of Blades with the Imperial Fist, the Emperor's Children have the Dance of the Fireblade, a somewhat annual sword duel between Fulgrim's lineage, competing for the Fireblade, a sword once forged to show friendship and brotherhood between Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus. The Lord High Commander of the Emperor's Children is Fabius Bile. Not a lot of people have seen him in forever and assume he's actually dead, but it turns out he was helping Belisarius Cawl to create the Primaris Marine, because in canon Fabius Bile literally creates a clone of both Horus and Fulgrim. And Fabius is the first Old Marine to cross the Rubicon Primaris and become one. Meanwhile, Fulgrim met his demise when he was dueling Gilgamesh, and he was ran through by the Lair Blade. He lay dead in a tomb on Chemos, until many, many years later he was resurrected by Yvraine, being the first Primarch to return. Fulgrim sees beauty within the Eldar, even if they are Xenoscum. They're not as bad as other Xenoscum. And yes, he claims the Emperor's sword eventually.